So we're continuing Mirz Hashem in the Kitzur in Siman Kuf Tesvav, chapter 115, and we're up to Halacha Gimel, Halacha 3. In the Vashal Shabazet Tavshila Kimach and Ugrisin Sheichol Nimstavi B'Kdiris. So here the Kitzur just gets into a little bit more of a technical detail that when preparing food for the Shabbos, remember again like this year, where Shabbos is Erev Pesach, he says make sure that whatever you're cooking that's chametz is not the type of chametz that's going to stick or adhere to the pots. Will have difficulty being scrubbed off. Al kin yivashal rak ma'acholim she'inem mispadkim v'achar achilu menaris heitves hamapo matznia osa im klei hachametz b'cheder asher she'eno ragel v'achas shama Pesach. And after I finish eating, I have to shake out all of the chametz. Preferable to do this, we'll talk about how to do it. Shake out all the chametz and then put away any of the utensils that have been used, or for that matter, even the tablecloth, together with all of the chametz items that I am selling. What happens if you have some leftover bread? So obviously the easiest thing to do is to destroy it. Let's say for some reason one can't do it. One could give it to a non-Jew. Again, so one could give it to a non-Jew, but of course one has to be careful with carrying in a permitted way before on Shabbos as well. And afterwards we sweep the house, either by asking a non-Jew to do it or to sweep in one of the permitted ways. So again, halachos of sweeping we're not going to get into right now. Suffice it to say with our types of brooms, one is permitted to go ahead and sweep, but that's the halacha. Okay, halacha dalid. Babokim mispalim bashkama. On Shabbos Erev Pesach, we daven early. And we'll explain why that is. Shola acher hazman shemutarim ba'achilas chametz. Because remember, since you have to eat your meal early, before the time that the prohibition of chametz sets in, we dafka daven early that Shabbos. V'nachon l'chalik seudas l'shtayim. Now, Shabbos Erev Pesach presents a very interesting issue, which is, I need to have 3 meals. Obviously, Friday night I'm having a meal with challah, but the issue is on Shabbos day, I have to have 2 more meals in which I wash, at least ideally. So how do I do that? Given the fact that, let's say by about, we'll call it 11 o'clock in the morning, I have to finish all of my chametz. So the Kitzur gives an interesting approach. He says, split the morning meal into 2. What does this mean? Dahainu, shevarich birkas hamazon umafsik ma'at bahalicha, ubedivrei Torah, o betiol v'chozer v'not al yadav v'ochel kitzas u'mevarich shenis birkas hamazon kedei lekayim mitzvahs suda shlishis. So he gives a very interesting approach over it. He says, here's what you do. You wash. You go ahead, you make hamotzi. You eat some of the challah. Then you go ahead and you could eat something else if you want, or right then and there you could just stop. Bench. Get up from the table, learn a little bit, take a walk for a little bit, make some type of hefsek, defined interruption, and then wash again and sit down again. Now what that allows you to do is essentially have 2 meals in the morning before the time for the prohibition of chametz sets in. And that way one could go in and fulfill shalosh of this. Now, it's interesting, the Ramah holds that, the Ramah isn't such a big fan of this procedure. The Ramah just says it is better instead to eat later on in the day, even if you're not going to wash. So the Ramah says you could have some meat, you could have some fish, you could have some other food item. In other words, technically speaking, although ideally one is supposed to wash for shalosh of this, the Ramah feels that having shalosh of this later on in the afternoon, after midday, is more important than washing. And therefore he prefers to go ahead and have you eat later on in the day, even though you won't be able to wash. It seems that conventional wisdom is like the Kitzur, and if possible, to go ahead and split one's meal into 2 in the morning, and therefore getting in 2 seudos Shabbos morning, finishing up shalosh hadis. If for some reason one can't do that, one can't eat, one doesn't have time, one is running late, then one could fulfill shalosh hadis in the afternoon by eating some meat or some fish. Incredible. All right, let's go weiter. Says the Kitzur. Actually, we could skip now to halacha vav. Be'erev Shabbos, yizaher kol adam ma'od lishal mefrishu challah min hachallah she'afu l'chvod Shabbos. Here's this a general halacha where the Kitzur writes that on Friday, in general, this is a general halacha, one should make sure that challah has been separated from their bread. Remember again, we know that we have a halacha that says when you bake a loaf of bread of a certain size, one has to separate challah. So today, in the absence of the Beis HaMikdash, in the absence of the ability to give it to the Kohen, so we burn the challah. We separate that little piece, we burn it. The Kitzur writes you have to go ahead and make sure that challah was removed from the loaves before Shabbos. Why? Ki aser v'hafrish challah b'Shabbos v'gam asur la'ashosan, because there's a problem. The problem is that you can't separate out challah on Shabbos. The reason you can't do that is because that it has the appearance of fixing something, right? The food, the bread, so to speak, is untied before, and then you fix it by taking challah. So you can't take challah on Shabbos itself. This becomes an acute issue, really, on Erev Shabbos Pesach, or Shabbos Erev Pesach, right? Shabbos Erev Pesach, because then, what should I do? If I didn't separate out challah, so the problem just is I can't wait till Motzei Shabbos, or till after Yom Tiv, because it's going to be chametz. So therefore the Kitzur just says, especially on this weekend, especially when Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, make sure to go ahead and separate, make sure that the challah is separated from the loaves before Shabbos. Now the Kitzur does acknowledge that if one failed to do so, are there mechanisms that one could avail themselves of? There are, but as the Kitzur writes, they're somewhat complicated to go ahead and utilize. Okay, we'll stop over here for today. Wishing everyone a wonderful day.